Assalamu alaikum, dear fellows. So today we will be going to discussing about the aspects that how our brain actually works. If I told you that it is changing every second, your brain is whole changing itself every second, and that is the real cause that it consumes the 20% energy of the whole body weight, except being a one third of the total body weight, because it needs the energy to refresh some important things which we will be going to discussing in this video. So what and how does the brain actually work? The brain works in specific ways. So most of the people say around about that our brain just like a memory card, that it stores information, but that concept is actually wrong, absolutely wrong. The brain is a recombinant, powerful supercomputer like engine that consistently changes itself as per the information is fed to it. We already talked about the habits, the experiences, the loops we follow. The what the heck that those loops comes from where? Now in this video we will be gonna breaking down each of these concepts, that how actually the brain is functioning at its deepest ever level. Number one, whenever we try to learn anything new, excuse me. So whenever we try to learn something new, new patterns and new neural connections are being formed in our two main parts of the brain. Number one, prefrontal cortex. Number two, hippocampus. The prefrontal cortex functions as just like a labor, for example a labor who is doing a new kind of labor shift for the day which he has never done before, and he is struggling when he is lifting the rocks, he is struggling when he is cementing the walls, he is struggling in each thing, but with repetition he just knows the pieces of information that I have to lift, I have to drag, I have to drop, I have to paint. These are the pieces of information which get connected inside the hippocampus. The hippocampus is a temporary memory shaft in which we are consciously just working on the task, on the given task in the current time for the first time. And this first time and second time and third time, this contributes to a long term chain of 7 or 40 days. It is approximate data from the conscious science. So the hippocampus and prefrontal parts of our brain are contributed in the conscious side of our brain, because these two are used for our conscious thinking and conscious contribution to do any kind of task. How does the neuroplasticity contribute in them? So the brain is totally composed of 86 approximate billion neurons, in which it is a minor and largest part, prefrontal cortex. It works as I told you already, that a labor who doesn't know anything, it consistently does the task again and again, and it gets burned out after a couple of moments. So it is the real-time engine which is working on a task. For example, I am solving a mathematical equation which I haven't solved before. The prefrontal cortex gets active. New neural connections are being formed. New information is being fed to it. What is happening? Basically, one neuron contains 1 trillion synapses connections on its dendrites and tail, dendrites head and dendrites. So what happens? It breaks the old patterns from the other neurons, and it builds new connections with the new chain of neurons, and it's breaking connection from this side, it's forming connection from this side, just as you are trying to speak a hard word but you aren't able to speak at first place. But if you try again and again, the neural frequency of this pattern is being formed again and again. The signal strength, it's increasing. The synaptic plasticity, it's increasing. These are the more deep topics about the brain neuroplasticity. The synaptic strength and the long-term potentiation of the brain is getting higher and higher. When you repeat a pattern, it's getting formed. Now, what happens after that? The understanding shifts from the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus for the neocortex. The neocortex is the place where the real deep understanding happens. It's the place where the brain has kept a lot of data set of information. The new information comes in, being compared, and if it fits with the old information, it gets locked in. If it conflicts with the old information inside the neocortex, it creates confusion. We sometimes say that it is a very confusing task because the new information, it hasn't formed the proper neural pathways yet. It hasn't been done enough of times of repeated steps yet that it has to form the new kind of pathways that we need to understand that knowledge. So here comes the first principle thinking in this thing. How could we use the first principle thinking to build the neural pathways efficiently in our brain so that our identity shifts from being a lowercase to being a higher case? First principle thinking says that break a task into its initial parts. Which parts of those information bytes are connected to your existing information inside your neocortex, which is also known as the long-term memory. It consistently recombines its synaptic connections and breaks its old connections in the form of signals and neuron patterns. These neural patterns exist in our neocortex for the purpose of long-term memorization, and connecting that long-term memorization to the new knowledge and the old knowledge, we get a new knowledge. That new knowledge is then locked inside it by through repetition, and it's bounded through the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex accordingly working together. Then comes the part that how the repetition which we do consistently becomes our perfection with time, because the neural patterns, the information encoded inside the neocortex is then transferred to our basal ganglia, which is the subconscious mind's first gateway. Here, when the pattern comes inside it and you are doing a task consistently, then the mental pressure and mental energy used by the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus is lessened, and it becomes an automatic loop. The basal ganglia contributes to make that working tasks list again and again and converts them into automatic loop inside our brain. We don't need to consciously think about the task. Just as 2 plus 2, I am writing that on the paper first, and 2 multiplied by 2 and 2 multiplied by 4 and 4 multiplied by 6, that is 24. We don't need to consciously think about that because the multiplication is repeated addition of a single number to itself, and that was the first step. If we are doing again and again, the patterns which are in depth built inside our neocortex have been shifted into the basal ganglia for our automatic functioning. So this is how we can transfer belief from the conscious mind, the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus towards the basal ganglia, our subconscious mind's gateway, in which the tasks become regularly automated. Then we don't have to think about it consciously. So let's break down the term neuroplasticity in more deep detail so we can understand it better. Neuroplasticity, basically, it is the connection in between neurons, which are one neuron makes with another neurons through their dendrites and their tails, heads, and etc. other parts. They are also connected with each other through signaling, not only the connections based upon the synapses. One neuron can generate enough amount of enormous energy in the microelectron volts that it can be transferred to other neurons inside the brain without just being directly connected. We just think about that, oh, this idea just popped up and this idea just popped up out of nowhere, but the connection is wired through those regions of the brain which we don't use in our whole life that usually are just triggered at that time when we ever think about the creative tasks. There is another part of our brain which we will be going to discussing in the next video that contributes to the creativity of a human intelligence. So this is basically human intelligence, that our brain breaks itself down again and again and reforms itself again based upon the new information. It breaks old connection, it forms new patterns and forms new connections, and you repeat action again and again, those patterns fire again and again and they become strengthened. Myelination occurs on pathways those pathways just get regulated in all sides the brain. They get elongated, they get dense, they get more energy to fed on, and this is how our brain organizes information. For example, I say a statement, the person is eating an apple. In this whole sentence our brain has used a trillions of amount of microvolts of energy for just completing this sentence. Why? Because it's just getting one piece of information from one side of brain and one piece of information from another side of brain, and it's contributing them and making a sequence of step by step these all words. And then our auditory cortex inside our brain, which commands our muscles of neck and mouth, and then our mouth directly outputs those signals into voice format, because everything is being done over here, and then it's processed and the command just speaks out from our mouth that the man is eating an apple. Every single word is not a word inside our brain, it's in the form of a signal, it's in the form of the bundle of signals which are just being clashed inside the neurons again and again. These neurons just transfer the information from one side to another side through the neuroplasticity. I've already told you the neuroplasticity always triggers when you ever do a new kind of task. That's why we say that the brain never gets older if you learn every time, because it's consistently forming itself. New stem cells are contributed and shifted towards the brain to form new neurons, and the number of 86 billion neurons also increases and decreases with a 0.001% this little bit frequency. And the long-term potentiation is the term in which our brain is consistently dragged upon a little pattern again and again. For example, I am doing 5 hours of mathematics a day, I am doing 2 hours of coding in a day, I am doing 1 hour of drawing in a day and 1 hour of meditation in a day. Again in that specific region of these different parts of our brain, different parts are included in the neuroplasticity. Old patterns get used enough of times and new patterns are recombined with the help of the neuroplasticity. New patterns are formed through the new synaptic plasticity with the other connections of the brain. Okay, so this was the topic for today. I hope so you guys understand what I mean about the brain understanding, that how does the brain actually work in its thesis. It is a extraordinary supercomputer which just consumes 20 watts of energy, and a ChatGPT like model that gets stuck when it's not trained again on the new information, and our brain is consistently training itself upon new information again and again. That whole set of ChatGPT just consumes 20,000 kilowatts of energy. That's a lot of power, and our brain just uses 20 watts, just like a dim bulb. You should say Subhanallah on Allah's creation, that our brain is a very quick and powerful supercomputer working with just 20 watts of energy, and it's using that energy to just freshen and keep the signals alive through the brain. So that's all for today. Inshallah, we will be discussing more details in the next video. Allah Hafiz.